The 16-year-old accused of shooting and killing a 13-year-old girl inside the Alderwood Mall in Linwood pled not guilty today in court. The suspect, Samuel Geza, is charged as an adult with murder.
You're a dangerous guy, right?
I could be considered dangerous, yes.
You actually told Dr. Urtanis about a month ago that the people in the jail have no idea how dangerous you are.
No, they don't.
Most killers are shaped by a lifetime of darkness. But what if that darkness takes over before they even grow up? These killer kids didn't just commit unthinkable crimes. They showed no remorse. One teen laughed as he received life in prison, while another coldly explained why he did it, like it was just another school assignment. And Christopher Gribble? His reaction in court will haunt you. Let's dive in.
16-year-old boy is behind bars in connection to Nathan Trapezzano's murder. Police tell us they arrested Simeon Adams today, just 1 week after Trapezzano was killed while on his morning walk along 16th Street.
A touching memorial brightens the day along West 16th Street, a place darkened by crime 1 week ago.
Surprised, shocked, frustrated.
In April 2014, the streets of Indianapolis were on edge. A 16-year-old with a growing reputation for trouble was making headlines. He wasn't just getting into fights or stealing, he was escalating fast. But no one expected what happened next. One early morning, a man out for a walk never made it home. The attack was so quick, so senseless, that police were left scrambling for answers. And when they finally pieced it all together, the truth was even more shocking than they imagined. Simeon Adams had already run into trouble with the law multiple times. By the time he was 16, he had been tied to several crimes, but he was always back on the streets before long. Then came April 1st, 2014. That morning, Nathan Trapezzano, a 24-year-old father-to-be, was out for his usual walk. It was something he did every morning before work, a simple routine that should have been safe. But as he walked down West 16th Street, Adams spotted him. He had a gun, and he wanted to use it. Trapezzano was cornered, forced into an alleyway. Surveillance footage later showed the terrifying moment when Adams and an accomplice closed in on him. There was no struggle, no way out. Seconds later, a single gunshot echoed through the streets. Adams ran from the scene, leaving Trapezzano collapsed on the pavement. A nearby security camera captured the moment his attackers fled, disappearing into the early morning darkness. By the time first responders arrived, Trapezzano was barely clinging to life. He was rushed to the hospital, but there was nothing doctors could do. The city was outraged. A young father-to-be had been gunned down for no reason, and the suspect, a 16-year-old with a criminal history. Police launched a manhunt, tracking Adams down just 2 weeks later after he was hospitalized from another shooting incident. And when officers pieced everything together, the truth was undeniable. Simeon Adams had a history of crime and violence. By 16, he was already tied to multiple offenses, from robbery to gun-related crimes. But what made this case even more disturbing was that there was no real motive. No robbery, no prior connection. Adams later bragged about the killing. To him, it wasn't about money or revenge. It was about proving himself. Witnesses said he wanted to earn street cred and showed he had no fear of pulling the trigger. But in trying to prove himself, he stole everything from a family that had no connection to him at all. In 2015, Simeon Adams pleaded guilty to the murder of Nathan Trapezzano. He was sentenced to 55 years in prison for the crime. But that wasn't the only charge. He also received an additional 12 years for a separate shooting, bringing his total sentence to 67 years behind bars. For the Trapezzano family, there was no real justice. Nathan was gone, leaving behind a wife and an unborn child who would never know him. Courtroom footage showed Adams standing stone-faced, barely reacting as the judge delivered the devastating sentence. There were no tears, no regret. Just silence. Nathan's family, however, was heartbroken. His wife, who had once planned a future with him, now had to raise their child alone.
There's still anger there. There's still an immense pain, a huge hole in my heart.
Outside the courthouse, emotions ran high. Some believed Adams deserved worse. Others wondered how a teenager could go so far down the wrong path, and why no one stopped him before it was too late. Simeon Adams showed no remorse for what he did. But the next case, it's even more unsettling. Brian Cohey wasn't just driven by violence. He was obsessed with it. What investigators found in his room turned a horrifying crime into something even darker.
Oh my God, I can't believe it.
It's not me in that car, you know?
I can't believe it.
Got it.
Oh my
kind of a time to not really know what.
It was a cold February night in 2021 when Warren Barnes made his way through the dimly lit streets of Grand Junction, Colorado. The 69-year-old had lived a tough life, spending his nights in shelters or wherever he could find a safe place to rest. But on this night, he was being watched. A teenage boy, Brian Cohey Jr., trailed behind him, silent and calculating. Barnes didn't know it, but he had been chosen. Not for revenge, not for robbery, but for something far more chilling. Cohey had been waiting for this moment, planning it, and in a matter of minutes, he would turn his deepest, darkest fantasies into reality.
That fellow who went missing recently.
Which fellow was that?
Warren Brown.
Warren Brown? When did he go missing?
The night of the 27th.
The night of the 27th? Okay, and how did you end up with him?
I murdered him.
Brian Cohey wasn't the kind of kid you'd expect to commit a brutal murder. Quiet, smart, a straight-A student. His classmates saw him as a bit of an outsider, but no one thought he was dangerous. No one knew what was lurking beneath the surface. For years, Cohey had been obsessed with death, not in the way teenagers get curious about horror movies or true crime. This was different. He researched serial killers, torture, anatomy. He fantasized about what it would be like to end a life with his own hands. But just thinking about it wasn't enough. He needed to do it. And on that February night, he did. The attack was quick, cruel, and heartless. Cohey ambushed Barnes in a dark alleyway, leaving behind a horrifying scene. When authorities found the body, something was missing. For days, police had no idea who was responsible. No clear suspect. No witnesses. But then a chilling tip came in. A classmate of Cohey's had seen something strange in his room. Something inside his closet. When officers arrived at Cohey's home, they weren't prepared for what they were about to find. Hidden inside a plastic bag was Barnes's missing head. And when Cohey was confronted, he didn't deny a thing. This wasn't a crime of anger or desperation. Cohey didn't know Barnes. He didn't need money. He didn't even try to hide what he did. He killed because he wanted to. From start to finish, this was an experiment for him. A twisted urge he had nurtured for years. He wanted to know what it felt like to take a life. And more than that, he wanted a trophy. That's why he kept the body parts in his closet, not to cover his tracks, but to relive the moment. Cohey was arrested on March 2, 2021. His parents were blindsided. They had no idea what their son was capable of, but the evidence was undeniable. He confessed with no remorse. In early 2023, he stood trial for first-degree murder. The prosecution made it clear this wasn't a moment of madness. It was planned, premeditated, and carried out with chilling precision. The verdict? Life in prison without parole. And for the first time, the teenager who thought he had total control over his own dark fantasy realized he was never getting out. Courtroom footage showed no emotion from Cohey as he received his sentence. No tears, no regret, just a blank stare. But his parents, they were shattered. The realization that their son had transformed into a cold-blooded killer was too much to bear. The family of Warren Barnes, on the other hand, felt a mix of grief and anger. They had lost someone they loved for no reason at all, and now they were left with only one question. How does a teenage boy become a murderer without anyone noticing? Brian Cohey's crime was disturbing, calculated, and deeply unsettling. But our next case, Samuel Gizaw's attack, was pure rage. His crime wasn't planned. It was a sudden explosion of violence that left everyone stunned.
$2 million. That's the new bail amount, just increased by a judge for the 16-year-old suspect accused of a deadly mall shooting. 13-year-old Jada Woods Johnson was killed in that shooting, an innocent bystander at Alderwood Mall.
Entering in a jail jumpsuit, 16-year-old Samuel Gizaw appeared in a Snohomish County Superior courtroom filled with his family and the family of 13-year-old Jada Woods Johnson.
The Alderwood Mall in Linwood, Washington was packed. Shoppers bustled through stores. Families grabbed dinner at the food court, and teenagers hung out without a care in the world. But in seconds, that normal evening turned into chaos. Gunfire rang out. People screamed. Security footage captured bystanders running for cover. And in the middle of it all, a 13-year-old girl collapsed to the ground, included in the crossfire of something that should never have happened. At the center of it all, 16-year-old Samuel Gizaw. The shooting wasn't a random act. It was personal. According to investigators, Gizaw had been arguing with another teenager. The two had bad blood, and in the heat of the moment, he pulled out a gun right there in the crowded shopping mall. He wasn't aiming at it. Jada Woods Johnson just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. One bullet, that's all it took. As the crowd scattered, Jada's family rushed to her side. Shoppers screamed for help, but it was too late. She never made it out of that mall alive. The shooter didn't stick around. He ran, but there was nowhere to hide. With surveillance cameras catching every second of the attack, it didn't take long for police to track him down. Just a few hours later, officers found Giza hiding inside a home in Mukilteo. They raided the place, guns drawn, and ordered him to surrender. He didn't fight back. No chase, no standoff. Just cold silence as he was taken into custody. And when investigators asked him why, he had no real answer. This wasn't a planned attack. There was no deep, sinister motive. It was reckless. It was rage. Giza and another teen had been arguing for days. They were wrapped up in petty conflicts, tensions rising until one decision changed everything. But it wasn't just a fight anymore. It was murder. And the worst part, the person who lost their life had nothing to do with it. Giza was charged with first-degree murder, first-degree violence, and unlawful possession of a firearm. At just 16 years old, he was facing decades behind bars. His legal team fought to lower his bail, but the judges saw things differently. $2 million. That's how serious the court was taking this case. At his first hearing, Jada's family sat just feet away. Her mother, her siblings, all forced to listen as the person who ended her life tried to argue for a second chance. The community wasn't having it. They demanded stricter laws, harsher punishments, justice. And Giza? He could barely lift his head. The courtroom was tense. The weight of the crime hung over the entire room. Giza sat with his attorneys, quiet and emotionless. No tears, no remorse. Just the reality that his life, too, was now over. But for Jada's family, there was no closure. No sentence could bring her back. Her name now carries a different kind of power. Her loved ones are pushing for Jada's law, a legal change to hold violent teens accountable before it's too late. Because in the end, this didn't have to happen. Samuel Giza made one reckless choice that destroyed a family. But our next case, it wasn't a split-second decision. Christopher Gribble's crime was something far worse. Cold, calculated, and planned down to the last detail.
Well, Tom and Tiffany, this is a community that fiercely protects the privacy of the Cates family. No one is very talkative. We can tell from the positive honks we're getting from passing cars that people are satisfied with today's verdict.
Prosecutor Jeff Strelzin showed a family picture to the man who murdered Kimberly Cates and nearly killed her young daughter, Jamie. Christopher Gribble is serving life in prison for murdering Cates.
It was a quiet night in Mount Vernon, New Hampshire, the kind where the only sounds were the wind in the trees and the occasional hoot of an owl. Inside the Cates' family home, Kimberly Cates and her 11-year-old daughter, Jamie, were asleep, completely unaware that 4 intruders were creeping toward their bedroom. But this wasn't a robbery. It wasn't a burglary gone wrong. This was planned, targeted, and by the time the night was over, a mother would be gone, a young girl would be fighting for her life, and the town would never be the same again. Christopher Gribble wasn't acting alone. He and 3 others, including his best friend, Stephen Spader, had come up with a plan, a home invasion, a thrill kill. They wanted to break into a random house, harm the people inside, and leave without being noticed. To them, it was a game. And on October 4th, 2009, they picked their target. Kimberly and Jamie were asleep when the attack began. The intruders broke in through the back door, creeping through the darkened house until they reached the bedroom. Then, with machetes and knives in hand, they struck. It was brutal, unforgiving. Kimberly fought, but she didn't stand a chance. Jamie, just 11 years old, was also harmed, but she survived. The intruders vanished into the night, leaving the house in chaos. Jamie somehow found the strength to call 911. When police arrived, they were met with a scene straight out of a nightmare. Investigators had no doubt this wasn't just a random robbery. It was something much darker. And when they found out who was responsible, the town was horrified. Christopher Gribble had no real reason for what he did. There was no personal vendetta, no financial gain. He and his friends wanted to kill, just to see what it felt like. Later, he would brag about what happened. He showed no remorse, no regret. To him, it was just another story to tell. But he didn't expect to be captured so quickly. It didn't take long for police to track down the 4 intruders. And once one of them started talking, the whole plan unraveled. Christopher Gribble stood trial, pleading insanity. He claimed he had no control over his actions. But the jury saw through it. They didn't buy a word of it. He was found guilty on all charges, life in prison, no parole.
4 person that the verdict is guilty, so say you all, ladies and gentlemen?
Yes.
Yes.
The judge made it clear there would be no second chances. In court, Gribble barely reacted, while the victim's family shed tears. While the town mourned the loss of Kimberly Cates, he sat calm, indifferent, like none of it mattered. But for Jamie, the survivor of the attack, this was more than just a sentence. It was the first step toward healing. She had faced unspeakable horror that night, but she refused to be defined by it. Christopher Gribble's crime was ruthless, and his lack of remorse made it even more disturbing. But the next case, Carly Gregg took betrayal to another level, turning on the very people who raised her in an act so shocking, even the courtroom struggled to process it.
Who was pointing that gun at you?
It was Carly.
While the events on March 19th were tragic, the events on March 19th were not intentional.
And in count 3, what are you facing?
Another 10 years.
Another 10 years. So the jury will either acquit you or you'll be facing 2 life sentences.
In a quiet Mississippi neighborhood, the unthinkable happened. A 15-year-old girl wasn't just suspected of breaking the law. She was charged with something far worse. Her own mother was dead, her stepfather left clinging to life. And at the center of it all, a teenage girl who showed no signs of remorse. But was this a case of a troubled teen snapping under pressure, or was it something far darker? Carly Gregg's life seemed normal on the surface. She was just another teenager, until family tensions boiled over. On the night of the crime, Carly's mother, Ashley Smiley, and her stepfather were home, unaware that their lives were about to change forever. Then, without warning, gunshots rang out. Ashley was fatally wounded. Her stepfather, desperately injured, managed to call 911. His chilling words, she killed her mom.
Okay, sir. Where's your wife? She's dead on the floor of my stepdaughter's room. What's your wife's name? Ashley Smiley.
By the time police arrived, Ashley was gone. Her husband survived, but just barely. And the shooter? Their own daughter. As the investigation unfolded, details emerged that shocked even the most seasoned detectives. Carly had planned this. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. The attack was calculated, deliberate. But why? Was there a hidden history of conflict? A breaking point no one saw coming? Or was there something far more sinister beneath the surface? Court testimony painted a disturbing picture. Carly had expressed deep resentment toward her mother. Some believed she felt controlled, unheard, trapped. Others argued that her actions were driven by something darker, a deep-seated anger that no one took seriously until it was too late. Whatever the reason, one thing was clear. She didn't hesitate. The courtroom was tense as the verdict was read. The jury didn't take long. Guilty. Carly Gregg was sentenced to life in prison for her mother's murder, along with additional time for the attempted killing of her stepfather.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Carly Madison Gregg, guilty of first-degree murder as charged in the indictment.
Despite her age, the judge made it clear there would be no second chances. Carly burst into tears as her sentence was read. Her stepfather, however, was overcome with emotion. He had survived the attack, but his wife was gone forever. For Ashley's family, there were no answers that could undo what happened. A mother was gone, a family was destroyed, and at the center of it all, a 15-year-old girl who showed no remorse until her sentence was clear. Up next is Brendan Dassey, whose case gained national attention, sparking debates about interrogation tactics and wrongful convictions.
Come on, Brendan, be honest. You can do it. Just tell us the truth.
I grabbed her arm, put it on the side, and tied her up.
Brendan Dassey was 16 years old when he was arrested in 2006 for the murder of Teresa Halbach. He was sentenced to life in prison with eligibility for parole in 2048. On October 31, 2005, a young photographer named Teresa Halbach disappeared. She had gone to the Avery Salvage Yard in Wisconsin to take pictures of a van for Auto Trader magazine. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. Days later, her burned remains were discovered on the property. Authorities quickly arrested Stephen Avery, a man who had previously spent 18 years in prison for a wrongful conviction. But this time, he wasn't the only suspect. His 16-year-old nephew, Brendan Dassey, was also accused of playing a role in the crime. Brendan was a quiet and reserved teenager. He had no history of violence, and no forensic evidence tied him to the crime scene. Yet, police believed he had helped Avery assault and murder Halbach. They called him in for questioning multiple times. Brendan, who had a low IQ and struggled with understanding complex situations, was interrogated without a lawyer or a parent present.
Did you? Huh?
Not really.
What do you mean, not really?
They got to my head.
During these interrogations, officers used leading questions, telling Brendan what they already knew and pressuring him to agree. He changed his story multiple times, each time getting closer to what the investigators wanted to hear. At one point, when asked how Teresa died, he guessed maybe she was shot. The officers immediately confirmed it, even though he hadn't provided that information on his own. Eventually, Brendan confessed to helping his uncle commit the crime. He told police that Stephen Avery had raped and murdered Teresa, and he had been forced to participate. But there was a major problem. His story didn't match any of the physical evidence. Despite this, Brendan's so-called confession became the key piece of evidence in his trial. In 2007, he was found guilty of first-degree murder, assault, and mutilation of a corpse. He was sentenced to life in prison, with the earliest chance for parole in 2048. However, he showed no emotion for his act. But soon, people began to question whether Brendan had been involved at all. Years later, Brendan's case gained national attention when the Netflix documentary, Making a Murderer, was released in 2015. The series highlighted the flaws in his interrogation and how he had been manipulated into confessing. His legal team argued that his confession had been coerced and unreliable. In 2016, a federal judge agreed. He ruled that Brendan's confession had been obtained unfairly and overturned his conviction. It seemed like Brendan would finally be free, but the state fought back, appealing the decision. In 2017, a higher court reversed the ruling, keeping Brendan in prison. His last hope was the U.S. Supreme Court, but in 2018, they refused to hear his case. As of today, Brendan Dassey remains behind bars, still serving his life sentence. His legal team continues to fight for his release, arguing that he was a victim of a broken justice system. Brendan Dassey's case raises difficult questions. How many people are sitting in prison because of coerced confessions? How many vulnerable individuals don't understand their rights when they're questioned by police? While Teresa Halbach's murder was a tragic loss, many believe that Brendan's conviction was an injustice of its own. Brendan's case reveals ruthless actions, but our next case shows how trust was shattered most horrifyingly.
She was 14 years old, and she was murdered. She was murdered on January 31st, 2011.
On January 31st, 2011, the quiet town of Harlem, Georgia was shaken by a terrible crime. 14-year-old Alana Mae Callahan was shot inside her own home. The most shocking part, the person responsible was her 14-year-old neighbor and family friend, Lacey Aaron Schmidt. What seemed like a tragic accident soon turned into a horrifying murder case. Alana was sitting at the family computer in the dining room when she was shot. Authorities say Schmidt then dragged her body outside and initially told police that she saw an intruder. However, his story kept changing. First, he claimed he had been playing with the gun when it went off by accident. However, investigators soon found evidence that proved otherwise.
Picking up Alana from the middle school bus.
I thought you just said you came from your house up the trail and you were coming up that way, and that's when you saw the back door and all open.
No, I was coming up.
Schmidt had stolen the gun from Alana's father and hidden it in his house. The gun's manual, a box of ammunition, and several items taken from Alana's home, including a digital camera and an MP3 player, were found in Schmidt's bedroom. This suggested a much darker motive than an accidental shooting. As the trial began, prosecutors painted Schmidt as a cold-blooded murderer. Alana's family was devastated. Her parents and sister took the stand, describing how Schmidt had been like part of their family. He came over every day, ate dinner with them, and was treated like one of their children. But despite this trust, he betrayed them in the worst way possible. Witnesses described how he showed no emotion when officers arrived. A deputy who tried to save Alana's life with CPR recalled how Schmidt just stood there, completely unaffected. Schmidt was charged with murder, theft, and possession of a firearm during a crime. In March 2011, a grand jury indicted him, and in May, he pleaded not guilty. His defense attorney argued that Schmidt was a traumatized and neglected child who snapped. However, the jury didn't believe this excuse. By the end of the trial, Schmidt was found guilty on all charges. Despite his young age, the severity of his crime meant that justice had to be served.
As to count one, we, the jury, find the defendant, Lacey Aaron Schmidt, guilty of malice murder. As to count two, we, the jury, find the defendant, Lacey Aaron Schmidt, guilty of felony murder. As to count 3, we, the jury, find the defendant, Lacey Aaron Schmidt, guilty of possession of a firearm during the commission of a crime.
The case of Alana Callahan is heartbreaking. A young girl lost her life in a place where she should have been safest, her own home. Her family trusted Schmidt, only for him to take their daughter away from them. Aaron's case shows a senseless act of violence that defies logic. However, the next case shows a killer who masked pure evil behind an innocent face.
She was the example of what love and kindness should be in this world.
On a quiet night in 2021, a tragic event changed the lives of many forever. It all started when 32-year-old Pamela Cabrielas, a real estate agent from Colorado, was driving home. She had a small traffic accident with another car. Nothing serious, just a minor bump. But what happened next was shocking. Inside the other car was 14-year-old Remy Cordova. Instead of moving on, Cordova made a terrible choice. He grabbed an AR-15 and fired into Pamela's car. She was badly injured and rushed to the hospital. Sadly, after a few days, she passed away. The police quickly investigated the case. They found out that Cordova had been trying to impress gang members. His reckless decision took Pamela's life and left her young son without a mother. When Cordova went to trial, the courtroom was filled with emotions. Pamela's family was heartbroken. Her ex-husband, the father of her son, spoke about how their child now wakes up in the middle of the night, crying for his mother.
You know your daddy loves you very much. It's about your mommy. Mommy died and is no longer with us.
The judge and jury listened carefully. Cordova, who had already been in trouble with the law before, was charged as an adult because of how serious the crime was. In the end, he was found guilty of first-degree murder and attempted murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison, but because he was a juvenile at the time of the crime, he could apply for parole after 23 years. However, he showed no guilt for his act. Cordova's defense lawyers tried to explain his past. They talked about his difficult childhood, how he had suffered from neglect and mistreatment, how his father had been murdered, and how his mother had struggled with mental illness. His family had been in and out of Child Protective Services for years. The judge acknowledged Cordova's tough upbringing, but made it clear that nothing excused what he had done. He told him, "Your life is tragic, but so is the life of the little boy who lost his mother." Pamela's family still struggles with the loss. Her brother, Alex Cabrielas, spoke up saying, "I understand trauma. We've been through it ourselves, but I did not kill someone." He reminded everyone that Pamela's son now has to grow up without his mother. The family was also angry that Cordova had been released from custody before the murder. They believed the justice system failed them, allowing Cordova the chance to commit this horrible crime. Meanwhile, another person involved in the crime, Nishan Johnson, who drove the car and encouraged Cordova to shoot, was also found guilty. He was sentenced to 35 years in prison. Before his sentencing, Cordova spoke in court. He told Pamela's family,
"I really know I feel for y'all, and I understand completely, and I'm terribly sorry for the pain that you guys feel. But I cannot take responsibility for something that I did not do."
Even after the trial, he maintained his innocence, and his defense team promised to appeal the conviction. No matter what happens next, one thing is clear. One bad choice can destroy many lives. Pamela Cabrielas was a loving mother, a hard-working woman, and a bright light to her family. Now, because of a senseless act, her son must grow up without her. Remy's case shows an unspeakable crime driven by sheer brutality, but our next case explores the calculated horror that stunned an entire town. On April 6, 2018, Margaret Douglas, a 98-year-old woman, was at home in Wadsworth, Ohio. She lived alone, never locking her doors, trusting her quiet neighborhood, but that trust would be shattered in the most horrifying way imaginable. Her nephew, Howard Leisure, grew concerned when he couldn't reach her. He went to her home, searching for any sign of her. He also called 911 to report her missing.
Yes, this is Howard Leisure. My aunt lives on 40th Street. A friend of ours stopped over there yesterday to check on her, and she was nowhere to be found.
Okay.
He says papers were on the porch for the last 3 days.
What's her name?
Margaret Douglas.
As he looked through her closet, hoping to find her favorite pair of shoes, he made a horrifying discovery. Her lifeless body hidden beneath a pile of clothes. Overcome with shock, he broke into tears. When police arrived, they knew this was no ordinary case. The way Margaret was hidden, the signs of struggle, it all pointed to something far more sinister. After a thorough investigation, the truth emerged. The person responsible wasn't a stranger. It was her 17-year-old neighbor, Gavin Ramsey. What police uncovered next made the case even more disturbing. Ramsey had secretly entered Margaret's home, filming her as she slept. Then he strangled her, but it didn't stop there. He stayed for hours, taking photos and videos of her body, and some of them too horrifying to describe. Then, as if nothing had happened, he stuffed her in the closet, covered her with clothes and a vacuum cleaner, and casually walked home, just 5 doors down, before his parents even woke up.
Images of Margaret before and after her death, as well as videos of your son with her. Engaging in acts with her.
Authorities wasted no time. Ramsey was arrested and charged with aggravated murder, burglary, kidnapping, and mistreatment of a corpse. Given the severity of his crimes, he was tried as an adult. In January 2019, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. However, he didn't show any remorse for his heinous act.
20 years to life, 25 years to life, 30 years to life, or life without the eligibility of parole in prison.
During sentencing, his mother pleaded for understanding, saying Ramsey had mental health struggles and had received counseling. However, Margaret's family saw him differently. They believed he was dangerous, a predator who would use their elderly relative as a test run for future victims.
You can't make me believe that my decision wasn't the ultimate cause of all of this. To simply say I'm sorry to a victim's family, that's not enough.
Even the judge had no doubts. She declared Ramsey unfit to ever re-enter society. However, a new law in Ohio has cast uncertainty on the case. The legislation eliminates life without parole for juveniles, meaning Ramsey may one day be eligible for release. His family lives with the fear that they will be forced to relive their pain in parole hearings. Patricia Leisure, Margaret's great-niece, has vowed to fight against Ramsey's release, believing he remains a threat. "We believe he's incapable of reform," she said. "If he's ever free, he will hurt someone again." Margaret's murder shattered her family's sense of safety. They've installed alarms, learned self-defense, and taken every precaution possible, but the scars of that day will never fully heal. Gavin's case was a brutal act of murder, but what happens when the victim is family? Our next case exposes a betrayal so deep it shakes the very foundation of trust.
Hurry, please. Hurry.
Is anyone else there? Where's the gun?
Sonny, don't do it. Sonny, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it, Sonny. I'm not trying to hurt you, son.
It was supposed to be a joyful holiday season, but just 6 days before Christmas in 2016, a tragedy struck a family in Martinez, Georgia. A 16-year-old boy, Sonny Kim, did something that no one could have ever imagined. He shot and killed his 23-year-old sister, Ashley Kim. The Kim family was left in shock and heartbreak, struggling to understand how their quiet and intelligent son could commit such a horrifying act. That night, Sonny's stepfather, James Brazel, noticed something was wrong. Sonny was not himself. His eyes were dark, his voice was strange, and he seemed completely disconnected from reality. It was as if something had taken over him. Without warning, Sonny pulled out a gun and shot his sister 8 times. The house was filled with chaos and fear. His stepfather, hearing the gunfire, rushed to the living room, only to see a terrifying sight: Sonny standing there with a gun in his hand. Sonny then tried to load his weapon to shoot his stepfather, but he fumbled with the magazine and failed. Later, during the investigation, Sonny admitted that his plan was far worse than anyone had thought. He had intended to kill his entire family, his mother, stepfather, and sister, before ending his own life. But why? That was the question everyone desperately wanted answered. At first, the prosecution believed that Sonny had killed Ashley out of jealousy. She was a bright and outgoing young woman who had returned home for the holidays from college in Colorado. Meanwhile, Sonny, who had been homeschooled and completed high school by 15, was quiet and withdrawn. However, Sonny's family refused to believe that. His father insisted that Sonny had loved his sister more than anyone. His mother, Nikki Brazel, was devastated. She could not accept that her son was a murderer. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered something disturbing. Sonny had been struggling with serious mental health issues, something his family had never fully understood. Dr. Allison Paginelli, a forensic psychologist, studied Sonny's case for months. She found that he showed signs of severe psychological disorder, chances of being linked to autism spectrum disorder, and past trauma caused by his biological father. In court, Sonny pleaded guilty because of mental illness. The judge sentenced him to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years, plus additional time for firearm and assault charges. However, because of his mental condition, he would receive psychiatric care while serving his sentence. His mother sat in the courtroom heartbroken. She left multiple times, unable to bear the sight of her son standing before the judge. Through her tears, she said, "I would love to take my son home now. I would just love to give him a hug and a kiss, because I know that he's not a murderer." The tragedy of Sonny Kim's case left many questions unanswered. How could a boy who loved his sister so much take her life? Was it truly jealousy? Or was it a deeper struggle with mental illness that no one recognized in time? His story is heartbreaking because it's not just about a crime. It's about a family torn apart by something they didn't understand. While Ashley's life was stolen in a moment of violence, Sonny's life was also lost differently. His mother and stepfather will forever grieve for both of their children, one who's gone forever and one who will never be the same again. Up next, Andrea Balser, a teenager whose shocking crime shattered the very foundation of family and trust. What led to such a devastating act, and what consequences did she face?
This question would be, I snapped. I took my little K bar there and planted it straight into my mother's back. And then...
On Halloween night, October 31st, 2016, Winthrop, Maine experienced one of the most horrifying crimes in its history. 17-year-old Andrea Balser made a chilling 911 call, confessing to stabbing her parents to death. Initially, she told the dispatcher she had snapped, citing struggles with gender identity and acceptance. In a moment of rage, she took the lives of the very people who had raised her. Andrea's story was both shocking and heartbreaking. That night, she made a devastating choice that changed everything. While hugging her mother, she suddenly pulled out a knife and stabbed her. Her father, awakened by the screams, rushed to help, only for Andrea to turn on him as well. A military-style knife was later found near his body. The tragedy didn't end there. She also killed the family's small pet. However, when her older brother, Christopher, stood before her, she spared him, saying, "It's not your day." When the police arrived, they expected to find someone in distress, but Andrea remained calm. As she spoke to detectives, she even laughed while recounting the events. Her lack of remorse was deeply unsettling.
Kind of quickly beaten out of me, you know?
Andrea later claimed she had struggled with gender identity and felt her parents didn't support her. She also alleged that her mother had been mistreated. However, her family strongly denied these claims. Her uncle, Carl Pierce, insisted that Andrea's parents were loving and supportive. He called her accusations an insult to their family, stating that nothing could justify the horrific crime she had committed.
I told them what I wanted to be, you know, I question my identity, that's...
Christopher, Andrea's older brother, struggled to understand her actions and could not forgive her. In a heartfelt statement, he said, "I still hear our mother's screams every night. She was stabbed by the son who loved her so much. You are an inhuman creature." His words were filled with pain and sorrow as he recalled the horrific events that took their parents' lives. Andrea pleaded guilty in hopes of receiving a lesser sentence. The judge acknowledged her struggles with gender identity, but emphasized that personal challenges could never justify such violence. Ultimately, she was sentenced to 40 years in prison. As the sentence was read, she began to cry.
My entire support system was destroyed, and what was left was an extended family that did their best to make sure I was safe and healthy, but couldn't replace what I've lost.
Though tragic, the crime could not be excused by its underlying reasons. The court acknowledged Andrea's age and past, but emphasized accountability. Christopher, now orphaned, struggled with the weight of his sister's actions, while Andrea faced the lifelong consequences of her choice.
Keeping Mr. Balser in the juvenile system would greatly diminish the gravity of this offense. This is an incredibly heinous murder of his parents, and keeping him in that system would diminish that offense greatly.
The community was shaken, a family shattered. While Andrea pleaded for forgiveness, her surviving relatives couldn't grant it. Some saw a troubled teen acting out of pain, others a remorseless killer. Andrea's act was horrific, driven by sinister emotions. Our next case shows a brutal act of oppression that will leave you speechless.
How my sister and my grandma still forgave me on that very first day.
On October 14th, 2021, 17-year-old Ethan Orton made a decision that would alter his life forever. Living in Cedar Rapids, Iowa with his parents, Casey Arthur Orton and Misty Scott Slade, Ethan had always felt emotionally neglected. He told a psychologist that his parents were emotionally and verbally harmful, leaving him isolated and unwanted. The breaking point came when his mother emailed him the day before, informing him he had to move out when he turned 18. This pushed him over the edge. That night, as the house lay in silence, Ethan put his plan into motion. His mother rested in a chair while his father slept on the couch. He approached his mother first, gently waking her. She stirred, confused as he gripped a large knife. Startled, she attempted to rise, but tension filled the moment. His father, still asleep, remained unaware. Ethan then turned his attention to him, ensuring he stayed undisturbed. His mother, struggling, moved towards the kitchen in search of safety. He followed, determined to finish what he started. Grabbing another knife, he ensured there were no loose ends. Then, spotting an axe nearby, he made his final move. As the night stretched on, the house returned to silence. He had completed what he had set out to do, and nothing remained uncertain. When the police arrived, Ethan did not hide the truth. He admitted to what he had done, saying he wanted to take charge of his life. However, investigators found no signs of neglect or mistreatment. They only discovered the common disagreements that many teenagers experience with their parents.
I just know for a fact that I'm doing my part being up here, knowing that this is something that needed to be addressed, especially something that I thought I'd never do in my entire life.
As the case moved to trial, experts examined Ethan's mental state. A forensic psychologist testified that he did not suffer from any mental illness. He was intelligent, capable of logical thinking, and had carefully planned his actions. His choices were deliberate, not impulsive.
Described himself as a quiet, reserved person, a good kid, denied problematic behavior.
In June 2023, after reviewing all the evidence, the judge made his decision. Ethan received 2 life sentences for his actions. However, because of his young age, the law allowed him a chance for parole. He will be eligible for release after serving 50 years in prison. By that time, he will be 67 years old, an age when most people look forward to retirement and a quiet life. As Ethan heard these words, tears welled up in his eyes as he realized what he had done.
Today's 3-hour hearing included testimony from forensic psychologist Dr. Tracy Thomas. She describes Orton as an emotionally over-controlled people-pleaser who internalized a lot of family problems.
As the courtroom emptied, the weight of his choices became clear. What had started as a desire for control had led to a lifetime behind bars, a future shaped by a single irreversible night. In court, Ethan expressed remorse. He said, "One thing that is really important here is I am really sorry for all this." He wished he could take back what he did. Some of his relatives forgave him, but others could not comprehend how he could commit such a brutal act.
Something that should have never been done. What's really important here is that I really am sorry for all this.
Ethan's case is a heart-wrenching reminder that communication and support are crucial in families. While he may have felt unheard, his actions were extreme and irreversible. His case raises complex questions about emotional neglect, teenage mental health, and the devastating consequences of bottled-up emotions. Ethan's sorrowful pursuit of control takes 2 innocent lives. The next case reveals how emotional turmoil spirals into darkness.
If you accidentally ran over someone and killed them, would that bother you?
On a quiet night in Hendersonville, Tennessee, a crime unfolded that left the entire community in shock. 15-year-old Zachary Davis brutally murdered his mother, Melanie Davis, while she slept. What made the case even more chilling was his cold, emotionless demeanor during his confession. Zachary was 9 years old when he lost his father to ALS, a devastating disease that altered his life forever. After his father's passing, he struggled with deep sadness and isolation. His grandmother, Gail Cron, later revealed that he had fallen into depression. Yet his mother, Melanie Davis, never sought the mental health support he needed. As the years passed, he became increasingly withdrawn, and his fascination with dark and violent topics intensified. On the night of August 10, 2012, tragedy struck their Hendersonville home. As his mother slept, Zachary crept into her room, gripping a heavy sledgehammer. Without hesitation, he struck her nearly 20 times. When asked later why he did it, he coldly replied, "I wanted to make sure she was dead."
You killed your mother. And why did you kill her?
She wasn't taking care of my family.
But the horror didn't end there. After killing his mother, Zachary set fire to the house with his older brother still inside. Whether he intended to cover his crime or had darker motives remains unclear. Fortunately, his brother escaped unharmed, but nothing could undo the devastating loss. As investigators delved into Zachary's life, they uncovered disturbing details that painted a dark picture. He had developed a fascination with violent video games and horror stories, particularly Stephen King's Misery. His interest extended to phone apps related to serial killers and torture devices. Perhaps the most unsettling discovery was a notebook filled with eerie writings. One chilling quote read, "You can't spell laughter without slaughter." These words hinted at a mind consumed by darkness.
It said some things in there. Is that notepad yours that we found?
Despite his troubling behavior, mental health experts couldn't agree on a specific diagnosis. However, one thing was clear. Zachary understood the difference between right and wrong. He wasn't legally insane. During his police confession and later in court, Zachary showed no emotion. He spoke in a flat, monotone voice, never expressing regret or repentance for what he had done. This deeply disturbed both the judge and the jury. It was not just the crime that horrified them, but the way he seemed completely detached from it. His actions, combined with his lack of emotion, left everyone wondering what had truly led him down such a dark path.
Do you do the things your father asked you to do? Sometimes.
He was found guilty of first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, and aggravated arson. In April 2015, he received an automatic life imprisonment for murdering his mother. Later in June, the judge added 20 more years to his sentence, making his total prison time at least 71 years before he could be considered for parole. During sentencing, Judge D. David Gay stated to sentencing him to life in prison, but he showed no guilt for his act, which made the crime even more chilling.
Zachary Davis was described as anything but normal, whispering every spoken word as if trying to hide his true voice.
The case of Zachary left people with mixed emotions. His crime was horrific, and his lack of shame made it difficult to feel sympathy for him. However, his grandmother believed that if he had received proper mental health treatment after his father's death, this tragedy could have been avoided. In the end, this case serves as a chilling reminder of what can happen when deep emotional struggles go unnoticed and untreated. Zachary's cold confession left the courtroom in shock. The next case explores a violent story fueled by sentimental struggles.
Anyway, so if he's around somewhere here, I don't think he's likely to cause any trouble.
He doesn't seem like he'd be a real threat to the community. It seemed like he was in a stressful situation.
At just 14 years old, Cody Posey committed a crime that shocked everyone. To outsiders, the Posey family appeared happy. He lived with his father, Delbert Paul Posey, his stepmother Trione, and his stepsister Marilee on a ranch in New Mexico. His father worked for renowned journalist Sam Donaldson, and from the outside, their life seemed picture perfect. But behind closed doors, Cody endured relentless mistreatment at the hands of his father. No one knew the horrors he faced, until the day he couldn't take it anymore. On July 4th, 2004, Cody reached his breaking point. His father, enraged as usual, slapped him across the face. But this time, something inside him snapped. The following day, July 5th, he grabbed a shotgun and walked into the house. His stepmother sat on the couch, reading a book. Without hesitation, Cody shot her twice in the back of the head. Moments later, his father entered the room and Cody shot him too. His stepsister, Marilee, who had just walked in, was the last to be killed. In an attempt to cover up the crime, Cody loaded the bodies into a backhoe and buried them in a shallow grave beneath a pile of manure. He believed no one would ever discover his secret. But the truth was about to surface in the most horrifying way. On July 6th, journalist Sam Donaldson stopped by the ranch and was met with a gruesome sight: broken glass and signs of violence everywhere. He immediately called the police, and within hours, investigators uncovered the shallow graves. Cody was arrested the next day, on July 7th. Initially, he denied any involvement, but it didn't take long for him to confess. What he revealed left everyone in shock.
If the court turns this young man loose on society, he'll kill again if it suits his purpose.
Cody told the police that his father had mistreated him for years. He was beaten, kicked, and forced to work long hours without food or water. He was woken up with an electric cattle prod, whipped with a lasso, and even dragged behind a horse. But the worst came on the night before the murders. His father had tried to force him into something unthinkable. He wanted him to have a physical relationship with his stepmother. When he refused, his father burned him with a welding iron. That was the moment when he realized he couldn't endure the mistreatment any longer.
He snapped from physical and sexual abuse.
I was overwhelmed. I lost control of emotion. I didn't know what I was feeling.
His lawyers contended that he had reached a breaking point, losing control after years of harm. Former stepmothers, ranch workers, and others who had witnessed his father's cruelty supported his claims. When Cody took the stand, he broke down as he recounted the horrors he had endured. However, the prosecution maintained that Cody had planned the murders and exaggerated his claims of mistreatment. They highlighted the brutality of the crime and his attempt to conceal it. In the end, he was convicted on different charges for each victim: first-degree murder for his stepsister, Marilee; second-degree murder for his stepmother, Trione; and voluntary manslaughter for his father, Paul. When the verdict was read, Cody sobbed, broke down in tears, and lowered his head onto the table.
But he's expected to have an established plan on what course his life will take.
Despite the severity of the crime, Cody was sentenced as a juvenile. Instead of spending his life in prison, he was sent to a juvenile detention center with psychiatric treatment. Many people, including Marilee's biological father, believed that he had already suffered enough. On his 21st birthday, October 9, 2010, Cody was released. His exact whereabouts today remain unknown. Some believe he's living under a new identity, trying to leave his painful past behind. The case of Cody leaves people with mixed emotions. On one hand, he committed a terrible crime. On the other, he was a child who had suffered unimaginable mistreatment, with no one to protect him. Up next is Tariq Jackson, whose actions shocked everyone who knew him. What led to this shocking crime, and how did it all unfold?
The life that we was living, being in gangs and all that other stuff, it ain't worth 16 years or a death, because eventually you be put in a situation, and there's severe consequences that come with that.
This is Tariq Mikel Jackson, who was on trial for murder in Michigan. On July 12, 2015, 16-year-old Tariq Jackson allegedly pulled out a gun and opened fire in public after a fight broke out between rival Ypsilanti gangs in 2015. One of the bullets that Tariq had shot hit 20-year-old Keandre Duff in the head, killing him instantly. Tariq was charged with open murder, armed robbery, receiving and concealing a stolen firearm, 3 counts of felony firearm, and 11 counts of perjury. However, shortly before he was set to go on trial, he confessed to second-degree murder. This murder was not the first time Tariq committed a crime because he had a lengthy criminal history. In 2012, he was placed on probation as a minor for a first-degree home invasion. He was also placed on probation for a third-degree home invasion in August 2014, before being arrested for carrying a concealed weapon a few months later. He was eventually sentenced, and it was an emotional day for everyone there. The mother of the victim gave an impact statement.
Our whole world was turned upside down from that point. And the reason why I'm sharing this is because that when our children make these decisions out here.
Keandre Duff's mother blamed the gang culture the men found themselves in. She addressed Tariq directly as she delivered her statement. She said, "Our whole world was turned upside down. Our young men are lost out there. I don't want to see another young man go behind bars." Duff's mother also told Tariq that she forgave him and hoped he found salvation. Keandre Duff had previously been charged with the murder of 17-year-old Keon Washington. The charges against him were later dropped due to a lack of sufficient evidence to charge him. Tariq eventually had his chance to address the court, as he apologized for his actions, showing remorse and obvious regret for his actions.
First off, I just want to say sorry to the family of the victim. I wish the situation would have played out like that. I never thought that my choices and decisions would have affected so many people. No mother deserves to bury her son, and no mother deserves to see her son change. My bad choice led to a lose-lose situation for me, my family, and the family of the victim.
Tariq went on to warn other gang members, telling them to learn from him, because what they were doing wasn't worth the consequences. He warned his brother and friends who were involved with gangs to stop so they didn't end up like him. Tariq Jackson was sentenced to 17 to 40 years in prison for the murder of 20-year-old Keandre Duff. He is currently serving his sentence at the G. Robert Cotton Correctional Facility. Up next is David Moses, a case that left many questioning what drove him to commit such a chilling act.
A chuckle, a laugh, and yawn after yawn, David Moses acted strangely at his sentencing this morning.
In April 2010, 17-year-old David Moses and 2 girls entered the home of 81-year-old Dorothy Session in California with the intent of robbing the home. David Moses and the 2 girls, 17-year-old Angelique Nash and 15-year-old Katila Nash, had planned to rob the house because they thought no one was around. Angelique was left outside to be the stakeout, while David and Katila broke into the house. Upon finding out that someone was in the house, David Moses did the most shocking thing. As Dorothy resisted, Moses beat her mercilessly until she died. Katila also watched as David pummeled Dorothy to death. The police found Dorothy dead and her body was riddled with injuries. She had a broken nose, missing teeth, black eyes, and cuts to her mouth and face. Moses was eventually found and arrested before he was finally convicted of first-degree murder 2 years later when he turned 19. The 2 sisters were arrested as well, and they were sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. It was later revealed that Moses grew up without a father figure, and he was raised by his mother until he was 12 years old. He became a ward of the court and was eventually bounced between group homes due to his erratic and violent behavior toward the other children. While Moses was in the group home, he committed multiple crimes including carjacking and burglary, which led to the murder of Dorothy Session. He was eventually brought to court in 2012. In court, Moses' behavior was shocking to the core. He showed no remorse for his actions and laughed throughout the session. In an attempt to show that he found the procedure boring, Moses yawned and put his head on the table, mimicking falling asleep. At some point, Moses also licked his lips to show that he didn't care and that he didn't believe that anything was wrong. Some online participants assumed that Moses behaved that way because he thought he'd be protected by juvenile court laws, no matter what he did in court.
The chuckle, a laugh, and yawn after yawn, David Moses acted strangely at his sentencing this morning.
David completely fell asleep at some point and didn't care for anything that was going on. The prosecutor said it seemed to him that Moses was enjoying the trial and felt like it was a game. Despite these actions and how he showed no remorse, his attorney asked the judge to consider including the possibility of parole in his sentencing. However, the judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. David showed no reaction and merely licked his lips as he was escorted out. David's case remained closed until 8 years later, when it looked like things were going to change for David. A change in law led Moses to be resentenced. He was tried under juvenile conditions because of how old he was when he murdered Dorothy. He was resentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in 2020 because he showed no form of change since he was sent to prison and still showed no remorse for his actions for the brutal murder of Dorothy Session. During his resentencing, David remained nonchalant, but this time he had no smile on his face and just stood in defiance, as he still had no regard for the court. David Moses didn't get a second chance, but Brandon Spencer still has a petition 10 years later to set him free.
Eligibility is 15 years plus 25 years of life in accordance with Penal Code Section 12022, 3D. This is to be concurrent with the
On October 31st, 2012, 19-year-old Brandon Spencer got involved in a shootout with a rival gang at a Halloween party on the University of Southern California campus. As a result of the shooting, 4 people were wounded, and the area descended into mayhem. While many students ran away from the shooting, Spencer reportedly ran with the students before he was caught. Brandon was charged with 4 counts of attempted murder. It was revealed in court that shots had been fired into the crowd in retaliation at another gang member. In 2014, Brandon went to trial, despite the fact that all the people called to testify in the case said that Brandon could not have been the shooter because he was never involved in any kind of gang. The court denied him a lawyer and charged him on a witness's testimony and no evidence that linked him to the shooting.
I'm sorry for what happened, Your Honor, but I need some life in prison. And I'm not a bad person, but I made mistakes. But I'm not just some gangbanger that she tried to portray me as.
Spencer kept on insisting that he was innocent and kept on pleading for mercy because he admitted to making mistakes. However, the jury refused to take any other thing into account besides the fact that Brandon had shot into an open crowd, even though he didn't murder anyone. In under 3 hours at trial, the jury found Spencer guilty of all charges, and he was sentenced to 40 years in prison. In response, the 19-year-old broke down as the judge showed no ounce of mercy.
Parole eligibility is 15 years plus 25 years of life in accordance with Penal Code Section 12022, 3D. This is to be concurrent with the
Spencer banged his head on the table twice and cried until he was escorted out. In 2021, however, a podcast was released on the story of Spencer, and his case garnered attention once again. The podcast claimed that Brandon had not shot into the crowd and was only celebrating Halloween with his girlfriend at the University of Southern California. However, the jury portrayed him as a gangbanger, and the testimony of the star witness was all that was used to convict him. The podcast also revealed that Spencer had been shot in the stomach outside a restaurant, and the USC shooting was retaliation, a mistake that Spencer regretted. The star witness recanted their testimony after the investigation revealed that the witness who had been brought in to testify against Spencer was coerced because he had been arrested for an unrelated crime. The prosecution reportedly promised to get the witnesses' charges dropped if they testified that they had seen Spencer shoot into the crowd that night. The witness was charged with stealing $26,000 worth of merchandise from his employer and was not sentenced because he agreed to perjury. The witness said, "I did not see Mr. Spencer leave the party and come back with a gun. I did not see Mr. Spencer shoot a gun into the crowd or at Mr. Hall. I only said that I saw Mr. Spencer come back with the gun because the DA prosecuting the case told me that she needed me to say those things, or else she could not make her case for premeditation. I did what the DA said because I was threatened by the detectives investigating the case, and by the DA prosecuting the case that if I did not say what they needed me to say, the DA would intervene in my own pending criminal case and cause me to be harmed or sentenced more severely. After this was revealed, a Free Brandon Spencer movement began and 1,800 people signed the petition for Spencer to be released because he was innocent. An Instagram account was created and the petition to free Brandon Spencer after he spent 10 years in jail is still ongoing. Our next case is the Carpio brothers, whose actions left a trail of devastation.
2 gang members were sentenced today for killing a teenager on a high school campus in the Valley.
In the late afternoon of April 24, 2013, Antonio and Michael Stephen Carpio, known as the Rockwoods, due to their affiliation with the Rampart area street gang with the same name, arrived at Cleveland High School to pick up their 15-year-old brother, George, who was a student. Raised in Los Angeles, the Carpio brothers had been initiated into one of the notorious Rockwood street gangs in the Westlake area, which led their family to move to Panorama City in hopes of distancing themselves from the grip of gang life. It's speculated that one or both of the assailants may have also attended Cleveland High at some point, according to accounts from students. It was during this visit to the school that they encountered Kevin Orellana, a former student who still visited the campus to play handball with his friends. Orellana, an 18-year-old known for his athleticism and agility, was also called La Pulga, in English, the Flea, for his small stature and lightning-fast reflexes as a soccer goalie. Despite having graduated from Reseda High School a year prior, Orellana continued to spend time at Cleveland High while attending the West Valley Occupational Center in Woodland Hills to complete his high school education.
As a parent, we plan to dance at their wedding, celebrate a promotion, look forward to possible grandchildren. The last thought we would ever have is that we would have to plan their funeral.
Kevin Orellana of North Hollywood aspired to be a rapper, with plans to pursue enrollment in Cal State Northridge's esteemed kinesiology program as a backup. Despite his shaved head and numerous tattoos, Orellana staunchly distanced himself from gang affiliations, a fact reiterated by both Doerbecker and his family members. But his encounter with the Carpio brothers made everything crash. As the elder Carpio asked Orellana where he was from, insinuating gang ties, Orellana firmly denied any such association, saying that he belonged to no gang. The altercation escalated swiftly, with the taller Carpio initiating physical violence. Yet Orellana, despite his smaller stature, quickly gained the upper hand. But the confrontation took a tragic turn when the younger Carpio brother brandished a knife from his pocket and delivered 2 fatal stab wounds to Orellana's chest. Afterward, the Carpio brothers quickly fled the scene, with members of the Cleveland football team in pursuit. Despite efforts to catch them, the brothers managed to escape to a maroon minivan. Orellana was quickly transported to Northridge Hospital Medical Center, but it was too late to save him. Medical examination revealed a fatal stab wound piercing his heart, sealing his untimely demise and leaving a community reeling in shock and grief. Upon arriving at the crime scene, the police documented every detail. Among the array of evidence, they noted the remnants of the victim's clothing and traced a trail of blood and red stains on the asphalt, which suggested a frantic escape. One notable detail that caught the police's attention was a water bottle belonging to a teacher who tried to help the victim. But it was the unwavering courage of the student witnesses that left a lasting impression. Despite the looming threat of retaliation in a gang-affiliated case, these young individuals stood firm, eager to provide invaluable testimony. One particular student provided key details, linking one of the suspects to a distinctive tattoo often seen on campus, ultimately leading to the identification of Michael Carpio. Following their apprehension at their residence in Panorama City, the Carpio brothers offered varying accounts on the events leading up to the fatal stabbing. Michael Carpio claimed that Orellana had provoked him with a threatening glare, while Anthony initially denied involvement before eventually conceding to being present on the campus. But when pressed for a motive behind the stabbing, Anthony's response remained cryptic. In the end, Anthony Carpio of Panorama City and his brother, Michael Steve Carpio, from Pacoima, were found guilty on October 31, 2015, of second-degree murder in connection with the tragic death of Kevin Orellana. Anthony, who was 16 years old at the time of the fatal incident when he wielded a knife and inflicted multiple stab wounds upon Orellana, received a sentence of 16 years to life in prison. Meanwhile, his older brother Michael, who was an adult at the time of the April 24, 2013 killing and was reportedly unarmed during the attack, was sentenced to 15 years to life behind bars. This case serves as a tragic reminder that the mentality of gang members can have a devastating impact on the innocent. If the Carpio brothers hadn't gotten involved with their gang at such young ages, Kevin or Alana would be alive today. Now, we're going all the way to Springfield, where a Latin King member is facing first-degree murder charges.
Charged with robbery, drug crimes, and other offenses. A spokesperson for the district attorney's office, Jim Lyden, told 22 News another defendant, Jonathan Guevara, was also charged with the murder of 18-year-old Lopez.
The discovery of 18-year-old Latin King member Kenneth Lopez's body on March 25, 2015, sent shockwaves through the city's north end. Found in the yard of a house at Dwight and Calhoun Streets, Lopez had succumbed to fatal gunshot wounds sustained overnight. The perpetrator behind this was revealed to be a 25-year-old Latin King member, Lee Rios. Following the murder, Rios stockpiled ammunition and firearms as he believed that the gang would seek retribution for his actions. The murder of Kenneth Lopez was not a spur-of-the-moment act, but rather a meticulously planned and aggressively pursued crime. Rios himself orchestrated the murder with calculated precision, with the help of fellow Latin Kings members. Despite both Lopez and Rios being affiliated with the Latin Kings, their relationship had soured, leading to a falling out between them. In an attempt to reconcile their differences, Rios devised a plan to lure Lopez from his residence under the guise of resolving a personal conflict. But his intentions proved futile, and it culminated in a tragic and fatal outcome. On February 7, 2017, Lee Rios faced the consequences of his actions as he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As he listened to the judge reading the verdict, Rios' demeanor was quite calm for someone who just found out that they will be spending the rest of their lives behind bars. Our next case is Denali Bremer, a teenager whose shocking crime was fueled by manipulation and a sinister online scheme.
She was 19 years old and developmentally disabled. Investigators say she was killed because of an online scheme. A man they had never met promised millions of dollars to murder someone.
He was very matter-of-fact about the whole thing, almost glib. When he told me about shooting Cynthia in the head and kicking her body into the water, he laughed. And I will never in my life forget that.
In Alaska's remote wilderness, a sinister betrayal unfolded. Cynthia Hoffman, a kind-hearted 19-year-old, believed that she was on a simple hiking trip with friends. Instead, she walked into a calculated trap, one that would end her life in a chilling and senseless murder.
It all began with a bizarre online catfishing scheme.
Darren Schillmiller posed as a millionaire online, offering $9 million to, quote, rape and murder someone in Alaska.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do it. I didn't mean to do it.
Cynthia Hoffman was blissfully unaware. The 18-year-old she considered her best friend had targeted her in a murder plot. Her uncle Don Hoffman says that was characteristic of her trusting nature and naivete.
Denali Bremer, then 18, was lured into a dark web of manipulation by an online predator. The man, posing as a wealthy millionaire named Tyler, promised her $9 million in exchange for video evidence of a murder. Blinded by greed and eager to please her catfish, Denali began plotting a crime so heinous it shocked even seasoned investigators. To carry out the plan, she recruited 2 accomplices, including 16-year-old Caden McIntosh, and chose Cynthia Hoffman, her best friend, as the target. Cynthia, who had developmental disabilities, trusted Denali completely. That trust was heartlessly exploited. On June 2, 2019, Denali lured Cynthia on a hike near the Eklutna River under the influence of a fun outing. But for Denali and her accomplices, it was the perfect setting for murder.
The plot to murder Hoffman began when Denali Bremer began an online relationship with a man calling himself Tyler and claimed to be a millionaire. But Tyler was really 21-year-old Darren Schillmiller. He told Bremer if she murdered someone and sent him photos and videos of it, then he would give her $9 million. The teens lured Hoffman to Thunderbird Falls trailhead for a hike. McIntosh shot her in the head and put her body in the river. One day after she went missing, her body was found bound with duct tape.
The betrayal came swiftly. Once on the trail, Cynthia was ambushed. The group duct taped her hands and feet, rendering her defenseless. As she begged for her life, Caden McIntosh shot her in the back of the head with a handgun provided by Denali. Denali documented the entire crime, capturing photos and videos that she sent to Tyler as proof. The group then discarded Cynthia's body in a river, leaving her to be discovered by authorities days later. What makes this crime even more shocking? Tyler wasn't real. He was Darren Shillmiller, a 21-year-old from Indiana who had catfished Denali, preying on her vulnerability to orchestrate the crime from afar. The investigation moved quickly. Cynthia's family reported her missing, and police soon uncovered the group's twisted plan through text messages, social media exchanges, and incriminating footage. Denali's cold confession during questioning left detectives stunned.
I know what I did was wrong, and I know I could have probably done something different if I was able to.
Late this afternoon, a 23-year-old woman has received a 99-year prison sentence for her role in the 2019 murder of Cynthia Hoffman near Thunderbird Falls. Lauren Maxwell just out of the courtroom.
Denali Bremer was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and tampering with evidence. In court, she admitted to the crimes and expressed regret, but the damage was irreparable. She was sentenced to 99 years in prison without parole, ensuring she spent the rest of her life behind bars.
The only thing I know is that my daughter trusted these people. My daughter just wanted friends. Now I have to bury her.
She was a very smart, bright, vibrant young lady. She loved life. She loved music. She liked shopping, just regular kid stuff.
The courtroom was heavy with grief as Cynthia's family confronted Denali. Her father described Cynthia as an innocent, trusting soul whose kindness was cruelly taken advantage of. He called the crime unforgivable and a tragic reminder of the dangers of online manipulation.
The hurt I caused you and your family, I can never rectify in any way. I understand it hurts. You lost a precious child, and the community lost a daughter as well.
Denali, for her part, broke down during sentencing, but her tears did little to comfort those she had devastated. Her calculated actions and the gruesome details of Cynthia's murder left the courtroom speechless. Denali's case wasn't just a story of manipulation. It was a cautionary tale of how easily trust can be weaponized. Cynthia Hoffman's life was stolen in an act of pure betrayal, and the devastating loss is a wound that her loved ones will carry forever. Denali may spend the rest of her life behind bars, but for Cynthia's family, justice will never bring true closure.